Okay, so you know that feeling, right? When
Yeah.
that check engine light pops up on your dash. Uh, it's not a good feeling.
No.
And, it seems like lately more and more my mechanic, the one I've been going to forever, is saying, uh, I can't fix that. I need more information.
Right.
And suddenly I'm stuck going to the dealership, which is, not ideal. And it seems like this is happening to more people. And that's what we're going to take a deep dive into today.
Right.
Repair. What's happening? What does it mean for you? And what does it mean for, the shops that work on our cars?
Yeah, it's definitely a thing. I mean, it's becoming more and more relevant as cars get more complex.
Yeah, absolutely. So to do this deep dive, we have a few sources. We have statements from MEMA Aftermarket Suppliers and the Auto Care Association. So these are the folks that are representing the aftermarket parts manufacturers and the independent shops. And we also have a press release from the Alliance for Automotive Innovation, which represents, the automakers, the big guys. So what we're going to try to do is understand what's going on with Right to Repair, the back and forth, and what it means for you when you need to get your car fixed.
Yeah.
What does it mean for your choices? What does it mean for the price? And what does it mean for the future of car repair in general?
Yeah.
So let's start with the aftermarket perspective. What are these guys saying?
So on February 21st, 2025, the Auto Care Association and MEMA Aftermarket Suppliers put out this statement. And I'd say the initial tone is one of, recognition. They come out and say, hey, we appreciate that the automakers are admitting that we need a federal law on this whole right to repair thing.
So recognition, that's a good thing, right?
Yeah.
Like at least we're all agreeing that there's something that needs to happen. But I did get the feeling when I was reading their statement that they're a little wary, like, okay, you admit it, but what are you going to do about it?
Yeah.
And then they go on to say, just a couple days ago, the automakers put out a proposal, and we're a little worried that it's just going to slow everything down or derail real meaningful legislation like the Repair Act.
Yeah.
So what's going on here? Like, what are they really worried about?
Well, it seems like what the aftermarket is worried about is that the automakers are trying to control the whole conversation. They're putting out their own proposal to kind of steer things in their direction and avoid having to give up more control over data and repairs than they really want to. They've been pushing for open access for a long time, so when a limited proposal comes out, yeah, it's going to raise some eyebrows.
Makes sense. So they keep mentioning the Repair Act, which is led by Congressman Neil Dunn. What exactly are they trying to do with this? What's the goal?
The aftermarket folks, they see the Repair Act as like the most direct path to getting what they need. They want to make sure independent shops have safe and secure access to all the data they need to fix today's cars, which are super complicated. But the key thing here is they also want a way to enforce all this. A federal mechanism that makes sure the automakers actually follow through and don't just find ways to restrict access anyway.
Yeah.
Really, it comes down to preventing what they see as this, growing trend toward repair monopolies where only the dealerships have all the fancy tools and data to fix your car.
Which, when you think about it, it makes sense, right? Like if the automakers have complete control over all that data, they could just decide who can and can't fix your car. That doesn't sound like a good situation for anybody.
Nope.
And it probably doesn't help keep prices down either, right? Like I'm sure it would get more expensive to get your car fixed.
Oh, absolutely. And we have to think about the bigger picture too. The aftermarket, they're a huge source of innovation in the auto industry. They're coming up with new parts, finding new ways to fix things more efficiently. If you cut them off from the data they need, everyone loses out. Less choice, fewer options. And remember, we're not talking about some tiny niche market here. The independent aftermarket, they do a lot of repairs. Historically, they've done over 80% of out-of-warranty repairs. That's a big chunk.
Yep.
And it's not just about market share. It actually saves you money. Data shows that repairs done by independent shops are on average about 36% cheaper than going to a dealership.
Whoa. 36%, that's not nothing. So if right to repair efforts don't go anywhere or they get weakened, we could be looking at even higher repair bills down the road.
Potentially, yeah. And another thing the Auto Care Association and MEMA bring up is this whole issue of data collection. These days, OEMs, the original equipment manufacturers, they're collecting tons of data wirelessly from our cars. I mean, we're talking terabytes of information.
Terabytes, yeah. I mean, it's mind-boggling how much data our cars are collecting. It's like a little computer on wheels now.
Right. And what's really worrying is that we, as car owners, we don't really have much say in who gets to see that data and what they can do with it. The automakers are making those decisions, often without our input. And it goes beyond just repair data. Modern cars are tracking our location, our driving habits, what we listen to, everything. So this right to repair debate really gets at this bigger question of who controls all that data and how it gets used.
Yeah, it's a little unsettling when you think about it. I mean, it's my car. Shouldn't I have some say in who gets access to all that information?
Definitely. And it's not just a theoretical problem either. These data restrictions are already causing headaches for independent shops. According to a survey they cite, 63% of shops are running into problems doing routine repairs because they just can't get the information they need.
Wow, 63%. That's a lot.
And it gets worse. Over half of them, 51%, are having to send cars to the dealership simply because they don't have the data to do the repair themselves. We're talking multiple cars each month. Imagine the hassle for you, right? You have to wait longer, you might have to drive further, and you'll probably end up paying more. It really shows how real these consequences are.
Yeah, I mean, it's not just inconvenient, it hits you right in the wallet. So it sounds like data access is a huge part of this whole debate. Now, the aftermarket statement also mentioned a recent legal win, something they seem pretty excited about.
Right. They're talking about the dismissal on February 11th, 2025, of this lawsuit from the Alliance for Automotive Innovation. They spent 4 years trying to block a right to repair law that was passed in Massachusetts, and they lost.
4 years. So why is this such a big deal for right to repair?
Well, for one thing, it sets a precedent, right? They successfully defended a right to repair law at the state level, which gives them more ammunition as they push for federal legislation. It shows that these laws can hold up in court and that they're being taken seriously.
So it's a victory for their side. And they're definitely not shying away from the next steps. Their statement ends with a pretty clear call to action, urging Congress to pass the Repair Act. They even provide websites for people to learn more, repairact.com and mema.org LRO2R. So they're making their position clear, full steam ahead with the Repair Act, and a healthy dose of skepticism towards the automakers' proposal.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's shift gears a bit and talk about the automakers. What are they saying?
So as we mentioned, on February 18th, 2025, the automakers did come out with their own legislative proposal. But it's important to remember that the aftermarket, they see this as addressing only a tiny sliver of the whole repair market.
Right, so even though both sides are saying we need federal legislation,
Right.
they seem to have very different ideas about what that should look like and how far it should go.
Yeah.
I'll be honest, when I first heard that the automakers were putting forward their own proposal, I was kind of optimistic. I thought maybe this is it. Maybe they're finally coming to the table and we can work something out that benefits everyone.
Yeah.
What do you think? Am I being naive?
Well, it's true that any movement from the automakers could be seen as a step in the right direction. But we have to remember the aftermarket's experience. They've been fighting for this for a long time, and they've often felt like the automakers were dragging their feet. So their skepticism is understandable. They're probably thinking, is this just a tactic to delay the Repair Act or water it down?
So they're not necessarily against any proposal. It's just that they're worried this specific one might not really solve the core issues of data access and enforcement that the Repair Act aims to address.
Exactly. They're worried about loopholes, limitations, anything that could still make it hard for independent shops to get the data they need. They want a clear federal law that guarantees access, and they're probably not convinced that the automaker's proposal will deliver that.
Right. But couldn't you argue that even a more limited proposal is a starting point? Maybe they can build on it later, negotiate, make it stronger. I mean, isn't something better than nothing?
I see what you're saying. And some progress is better than none, of course. But the worry here is that a weaker law, one that favors the automakers, could actually backfire. Once a law is passed, it's really hard to change it. The automakers could then say, look, we addressed the issue, even if the problem isn't really solved.
I see. So the aftermarket's concerned that this could actually make it harder to pass a more comprehensive law like the Repair Act down the line.
Right. And for them, it all comes down to consumer choice and preventing monopolies. They're probably not convinced that the automaker's proposal goes far enough to protect those things.
Okay, so they're looking for a real solution, not just a quick fix.
Yeah.
So then a couple days later, on February 20th, we get another press release, this time from the Alliance for Automotive Innovation. And they're making a pretty big announcement.
Yeah. They're announcing what they call landmark right to repair legislation, which they're calling the Safe Repair Act. And what's interesting is they're partnering with other groups on this. The Automotive Service Association and the Society of Collision Repair Specialists.
Landmark. That's a pretty strong word. They're really putting their weight behind this. And they're saying this national plan will offer extra protections for consumers and make sure that repairs are done safely and that everyone has a fair chance to compete. I mean, that sounds like it could be a good thing, right? Maybe they're addressing some of those concerns we've been talking about.
It does sound promising, but what jumps out immediately is that we now have two different proposals, each with its own set of supporters. MEMA and the Auto Care Association are all in on the Repair Act, while the Alliance for Automotive Innovation is pushing the Safe Repair Act with their own partners. So clearly there are some differences here, and it'll be interesting to see where those differences lie. It's not a kumbaya moment, that's for sure.
Right. It's not like everyone's suddenly on the same page. And keep in mind that the Alliance for Automotive Innovation represents a lot of big car companies. So this Safe Repair Act, that's their solution.
Yep.
And the fact that they're focusing on things like additional protections for consumers and vehicle safety, that suggests they might have a different approach than the Repair Act. We need to look at the details to really understand how this will affect you, the person who owns the car.
Absolutely. We don't have all the specifics of the Safe Repair Act yet, but we can start thinking about what these different approaches could mean for you. When they talk about additional protections, they could be thinking about things like cybersecurity, making sure nobody can hack into your car's system, or they could be focusing on making sure repairs are done correctly so your car is safe to drive. And those are important things, no doubt. But the aftermarket, with the Repair Act, they seem to be more concerned with making sure independent shops have the freedom to access the data they need to do a wide range of repairs.
So it's like two different sets of priorities.
Yeah.
Right. One is about broader safeguards for consumers, maybe with tighter control over data access. The other is about making sure there's open access to data to encourage competition and hopefully keep prices down.
That's a good way to put it. And this brings us back to that disagreement we were talking about before. On the one hand, it's encouraging that the automakers are involved in the conversation and that they're working with different repair groups. Maybe the Safe Repair Act really is a good compromise.
Yeah, maybe they've found a way to make everyone happy, including the consumers.
But then again, the aftermarket has been very consistent in their support for the Repair Act, and they've already voiced concerns about the automakers' initial proposal. So it's fair to ask whether the Safe Repair Act really guarantees the same level of data access and freedom for independent shops. Maybe the aftermarket sees these additional protections as a way for automakers to still control things, to make it harder for independent shops under the guise of safety or security. At the end of the day, what matters most for you is whether either of these proposals actually creates a fair and competitive repair market.
Because as we've been saying, a fair market means more choices for consumers, better prices, and the ability to take your car to the mechanic you trust.
Exactly. If independent shops still can't get the data they need, you'll have fewer options and you'll probably end up paying more. So the outcome of this whole right to repair fight, it has real consequences for how much you spend on car repairs and how easy it is to get your car fixed.
So let's wrap things up. We're seeing some big changes in the right to repair landscape. For the first time, automakers are admitting that we need a federal law. That's a huge step.
Yeah.
But it's not a simple situation. There are two competing proposals. The Repair Act, which is backed by the aftermarket, and the Safe Repair Act, which comes from the automakers. And the big question is, how much access to data will independent shops have? That's the key to a fair and competitive repair market.
And for you, the listener, this means a lot. Strong right to repair laws could mean cheaper and more convenient repairs. It could mean being able to choose your own mechanic. And it could mean a healthy, independent aftermarket that gives you those choices.
Absolutely. So now that there are two proposals on the table, it's time to think about what's important to you. When you think about getting your car fixed, what are your priorities? Is it making sure independent shops have all the data they need? Or are there other things, like safety and cybersecurity, that you think should be the focus of right to repair laws? It's a question worth thinking about as these debates play out.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
See you next time.